My name is Suzanne Brock. I'm the president of the League of Women Voters of the Cape Cod area, and I want to welcome you all to our Racism on Cape Cod Part 2. For those of you that were not able to see our first presentation, it was done on, December 7th. You can catch that on YouTube. But tonight, we're going to talk about how can the Cape Cod community collaborate to eliminate racism? As many of you know, the League of Women Voters is a nonpartisan organization with two main functions. Voter service and citizen education is one, and advocacy for those things that we have studied and had taken a position on and feel that it's important to press our legislators to become aware and advocate for our side. I wanted to let all of you know that we're being recorded. We will be using the chat function for questions. So if you have any questions during any of the presentations, please put your questions into chat and they will be answered in the order that they were received at the end of the presentations by our panel. Please set your video option to speaker view. So in that case, you will be able to see the main speaker when he or she is presenting. And please make sure that you're muted so that there's no background sound coming through. Why should we all be concerned enough to be involved? Not only recognizing and understanding racism, but also working to eliminate it. The League of Women Voters of Cape Cod area has convened this second discussion of racism on the Cape with an emphasis on ways to address its corrosive influence. It should be obvious to everyone in our local, state, and national communities that racism is morally wrong and that it hurts not only the people who experience it, but all of us as a society. For too long, racism has led America towards a divisiveness that is tearing our country apart. The League at the national, state, and local levels realizes that we ourselves need to be a more diverse and inclusive organization. We recognize that it is not enough to talk about the change that we want to see, but we must be the change. As an organization with a mission to make democracy work for all of us, we have to come to understand that to strive for a more perfect union means that we must work to make the ideals of democracy, like liberty and justice for all, a reality. It is with these ideals in mind that we seek to join in collaboration with various organizations within our community in an effort towards eliminating the individual and systemic impacts of racism occurring around us. We all have a role to play. Quoting Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., "Injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere." We are in an inescapable network of mutuality, tied in a single garment of destiny. Whatever affects one directly affects all indirectly. While this may be needed easily or quickly, it must be begun for any progress to be achieved. Thank you for joining us in these first steps, and we hope that you will continue the journey with us. Now I'd like to introduce our moderator for the evening. Susan Quinones is the Human Rights Coordinator for the Barnstable County Human Rights Advisory Commission. In that capacity, she oversees the activities of the Advisory Commission and their committees. She also assists individuals in resolving complaints alleging human rights or civic rights violations that occur within Barnstable County. Susan has been a resident of Mashpee for 10 years, where she lives with her husband, Alexander Jackson. Prior to relocating in Massachusetts in 2000, Susan was a partner with a major law firm in New York City and is currently an attorney in good standing in Massachusetts. Susan?
Thank you, Sue. Good evening, and thank you all for joining us today. As you heard, tonight's panel is actually a continuation of the earlier session that was held on December 7th, 2020, on how racism is experienced in Cape Cod. At the end of this discussion, we all recognize that participants wanted to know more about specific ways and actions that they could take to help eliminate racism. So this evening, we have invited an esteemed panel to share with us their ideas and what activities their associations are involved in to improve and eliminate racism. So I'm just going to introduce each of the panelists rather than have them introduce themselves, and then I will call on them individually. Our first panelist, we're going to start with Dr. Deborah Dagwan, and she is a member of the Barnstable School Committee and is presently a Barnstable Town councilwoman. She has served there for 11 years. She has had many leadership roles in the town council. She has also had a 37-year career in education, having worked both at the Boston Public Schools for 10 years and in Falmouth Public Schools for 27 years. With this information, I just want to say that there is also a larger, more extensive bio for each of our panelists contained in the flyer. Our next panelist will be John Reed. John Reed has had a 35-year career in the Barnstable School District. He taught history and social studies. And at the Barnstable High School, he was the attendance equity officer. John is currently president of the Cape Cod branch of the NAACP and is currently an executive director of the Zion Union Heritage Museum in Hyannis. Our next speaker will be Reverend Wesley Williams. Reverend Williams is a retired pastor of the Orleans United Methodist Church and currently is serving as a convener of the Martin Luther King Action Team of the Nauset Interfaith Association. He is descended from a line of Methodist ministers stretching back to American slavery. Reverend Williams, like his forebearers, has always sought to make social justice the core of his ministry. Next, we have Muska Youssef. Muska is an attorney with the law firm of Muska Youssef, and she specializes in providing affordable legal services to people in family and probate court. Most recently, she joined the board of Amplify POC, an organization committed to narrowing the racial wealth gap on Cape Cod. She's committed to energizing young people of Cape Cod to get involved in local politics and feels empowered by their local representation. And then finally, rounding out our panel is Jean Morrison. Jean has had more than 30 years of managerial experience with nonprofit and government agencies. Most recently, she was at the MBTA, where she led the T in satisfying a civil rights compliance agreement with the Massachusetts Attorney General's office after 9 years of non-compliance and oversight. Currently, Jean serves on several local and state boards and steering committees for nonprofit organizations. Most importantly, she's here today representing the League of Women Voters as the co-vice president of the League's board. She is also a member of the Barnstable County Human Rights Advisory Committee, president of Amplify POC Cape Cod, and a member of the Barnstable No Place for Hate Committee and the MLK Steering Committee. And that is our panel. As I said, additional, more extensive biographical information is contained in the flyer. Before we go on to the individual members, the earlier session is summarized, excuse me, get a drink of water, is summarized on slides that we'll now share with you. At the time of our first panel, we asked each member about their observations about racism on the Cape. They were asked to assess what portion of the communities were at greatest risk. I believe those slides are available as a screen share. Okay, I don't see them. We seem to be having some, oh, here we go. Okay, so this is a summary of what was discussed. As you can see, the issues that were discussed run the spectrum from unequal opportunities in employment, housing, health disparities, to more direct attacks like use of racial slurs. I would like to draw your attention to the next slide, which actually shows how dehumanizing it can be if you are constantly subject to things like threats, bullying, intimidation. These are all things that make lives for people here on the Cape very uncomfortable, and racism is dehumanizing. The next slide clearly shows that everybody's at risk. When you look at this slide, you notice that it's young people, old people, immigrants, Black people, brown people, people with physical disabilities. Everyone seems to be at risk and can be a subject of racism. And you see how on the right side of the column, you see how this can happen. What are some of the things that are created to, are acted upon to create this risk and danger? The next slide is a continuation of the former slide, again, showing their limited opportunities, loss of personal identity. Next slide. I'd like everybody to pay particular interest in particular attention to this slide, because it describes the impact racism has on the communities. And it starts to answer, what are some of the things you can do to fight it? So for instance, stepping outside of your comfort zone, educating yourself, helping your community by patronizing minority-owned businesses, joining organizations that share your beliefs and goals. And most importantly, we should all listen. Listening is the greatest tool to understanding. So as our last slide says, let's stop racism. Let's put an end to it now. Having heard some of the shared experience and how they put our communities at risk, tonight we're asking each of our panelists to share 2 or 3 things that their organizations are doing to address racism. And I'd like each of the panelists to limit their remarks to about 5 or 6 minutes. So I am going to start by calling on Dr. Deborah Dagwan.
Thank you, Susan. And I want to thank the League of Women Voters Cape Cod for this event. The organization I'm going to speak about are 2. One is the Town of Barnstable. I'm going to start with the Town of Barnstable. The Town of Barnstable has many boards, committees, and commissions, which act as advisory subcommittees for the town. These subcommittees, over 35 of them, are great ways for citizens living in the town to learn more about Barnstable. They can learn how the government works, connects services, and interacts with citizens on a daily basis. Each committee has a liaison from the town council, which shares their information with other council members. The vast number of these town committees, which range from environmental to historical, provide levels of skill and diversification of common interests. These committees also provide perfect opportunities for all of our citizens, the elderly, the adults, and our youth, to interact and learn from each other, thereby creating the initiative for breaking down racial barriers. To request the application form to apply or to learn more about a town board, committee, or commission, contact Barnstable Town Council office in care of the executive administrator, 2nd floor, 367 Main Street, Hyannis, Mass. 02601, or call the Town Council office 508-862-4738. And the fax is 508-862-4770. Other town and council initiatives. These are other things that are going on in our town that I feel try to unite our community. The second one would be the Barnstable Unity Day, an annual event initiated by a group of young Black men, ages 20, 40, and up, seeking to be proactive in establishing improved perceptions and relationships between law enforcement officers in the town of Barnstable and with young Black males, youth from their neighborhoods and community. The group name is Men of Action, and the contact person the contact person would be Brian, Barnstable police officer, Brian Morrison, Jesse, and Andre Barboza. For more information, you can contact Lynn Poignant, the town of Barnstable's community service director, Barnstable's citizen resource line, which is 508-862-4925. And a initiative that the town council themselves have been sponsoring and working hard to support is the YMCA Y Achievers. Town council helps to sponsor this program each year, which is a recruitment program for academically talented students from diverse backgrounds, from grades 8 to 12, which nurture and follow students all the way through college, helping them prepare for successful careers. The program is a collaboration with the Cape Cod YMCA and students from Barnstable, which began almost 4 years ago. And I put myself in as the contact person because the director has changed. The original director was Renee King, who did a wonderful job of starting this. But there is a new director right now. So you can contact me for more information. This is Dr. Deborah Dagwan for more information at 508-778-6824 if you want to learn more about this particular initiative that's being sponsored through the town. My second organization is Independence House. And Independence House is leading the way with vigor, vitality, and dedication towards ending the occurrence of domestic violence and sexual assault in the Cape Cod community. They offer domestic violence and sexual assault advocacy, counseling, safety planning, and community outreach services. The agency celebrated a 40th anniversary last year in 2020 and opened their first Independence House 24-hour domestic violence and sexual assault shelter, uh, which has been open for 3 years now. They are fully inclusive community that embraces and values diversity and welcomes and seeks volunteers to support many of their yearly initiatives. Independence House fosters unity in so many ways. And the following two initiatives are just two examples of the wonderful efforts they make to bring us together and help us understand one another. The first is the Jane Doe Project. It's called the Silent Witness Initiative. I take that back. And it's a yearly ceremony which memorializes victims of domestic violence who did not survive their abuse. And this has brought people from around the state to to see this display of of, of statues which display the victims who have suffered domestic violence and did not survive. So they give us a history about what's happening each year on the realm of domestic violence. And the second initiative is called the Clothesline Project. It's a display which visualizes the words, messages, or symbolic expressions of children, teens, and adults, survivors of sexual abuse. For more information, you can reach and contact the Independence House at Main Street, the main office at 160 Bassett Lane, Hyannis, Mass. 02601 508 6507 at extension 282. And I feel that domestic violence if it affects some of us, it affects all of us the same as racism does.
Mhm.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Dagwan. That was very interesting, and we will have those numbers and contacts available after this meeting. We'll make sure that people can get those. Next, I'm going to call on Reverend Wesley Williams. Reverend Williams, please tell us what the MLK group is doing to address racism. Reverend Williams? You're muted, sir.
How
There
is
you
that?
go. Much better.
I'll have to thank you all over again. I was having us represented on the panel and all. The Martin Luther King Action Team is a subset of the Nauset Interfaith Association, which many of you know to be a voluntary association of congregations on Lower and Outer Cape Cod, whose mission is to deepen our mutual understanding of each other's faith traditions, to provide mutual support and encouragement for each other, and to work together for the common good of our wider community, especially with the poor, the oppressed, and the marginalized. We are one of 4 outreach programs or committees of the North Interfaith Association, and we concentrate specifically on the elimination of systemic racial injustice, primarily on Lower and Outer Cape Cod. That's our catchment area. And we want to eliminate racism in that area in all its dimensions: institutional, cultural, interpersonal, and individual. And as you can imagine, this is a pretty tall order, and it has quickly become a kind of a many-headed hydra because we've been fortunate in one way to have people join. And it has become, however, to keep it from becoming unwieldy, we've had to do our work, implement our vision through the task forces, of which there are 4: conversations with the police, education task force, criminal justice task force, and then all of this comes together in our annual MLK breakfast where we kind of like show our face to the world. I've asked each of the task force conveners who are doing amazing work to list for me so that I could tell you the goals and the accomplishments thus far, because I didn't want to misrepresent them. I wanted to get in everything that they felt was very important. So I'll begin with the conversation with the police. As you can imagine, that is that is one of strong interest. And what we have been doing at this point with the conversations with the police is building trust and relationship through our conversations. And we have been very encouraged by their willingness to stay at the table and to engage, which has resulted in a deepening of trust. What we have wanted to do was to help provide a conduit between the police and the community, okay, particularly communities of color. And we feel that by concentrating on that, we are helping or at least talking with the police about the issues that the community has with the police, what they would like to see, and how their voices can be more deeply represented in the conversations with the police. We are very interested in how the police recruit and train their officers. We also want to help the community understand the culture that exists within the policing community, the challenges that the police have, and how we can work together to do that which Saraja Peele basically started out with in 1829 in London when he started the police force to protect and to serve. That is their basic raison d'etre, if you will. So that has been our main focus here, and we really do feel that we are beginning to build good relationships because our conversations have been basically with the police chiefs. So we are building better understanding. We're trying to understand the culture, trying to help the police understand where the community has issues, and ask the police how the community can help them. We feel that we've made some progress in having the police focus on anti-bias racism training. In fact, the Chiefs just recently signed a letter to the Cape Cod Community College requesting inclusion of an anti bias training to their criminal justice program. And so we're very, very, very happy about that. And we've been hearing a lot about defunding the police. I don't know how you feel about that slogan. We probably all have our own um, uh, issues with it, or means of support. But one of the things that we feel that we have done to help that is to enhance the connection between Outer Cape Health Services, um, supporting engagement with the mentally ill, with with the police and the calls and so forth. The police are not equipped to handle all of these issues that are entailed when they get calls and so forth. They shouldn't, perhaps, maybe um, their presence might only serve to escalate it. So we are trying to get them more connected with Outer Cape services to coordinate responses to calls so that the appropriate response is brought about, and the situation is rectified, hopefully more readily. The next task force I want to talk about is our education task force, and our education task force essentially, um, if I wanted to put it under a banner, is basically a task force that advocates for all the students, but particularly students for color. And what the Education Task Force does is to equip educators, administrators with resource material to advocate for students of color. And so the long term goals assist the districts to develop methods of hiring and retaining educators and administrators of color, to continue to organize education forums, workshops, or conferences. And in that regard, I have to tell you that I'm very, very proud of the organizing of a virtual 2-day educators conference that's going to take place July 19th and the 20th. This will be free of charge for all public school educators. And this conference is organized around the issues of diversity, equity, and inclusion. And the topics will include building an anti racist classroom,
Mhm,
um, the impact of racism on the mental health of students.
mhm.
And you might be interested in knowing that this will be led by a group of professionals, all except one of whom are from Cape Cod. They're local Cape Codders and
That's great.
people of color.
That's
The
great.
keynoters there will be two keynoters,
Mhm,
both from the Harvard Graduate School of Education.
mhm.
One is a person of color, the other heads the Harvard School of Education, and so we're very, very fortunate in.
Reverend Williams,
Yeah.
I hate to interrupt you, but we only had 6 minutes for each of the presenters,
Oh, I'm sorry.
and
Is it over already?
you have really given us a lot of information on
Yeah.
at least 3 of the 4 task force, right?
Yeah. Two. Yeah.
Okay. So I think there will be an opportunity during the Q&A for you to discuss some of the other works that you're doing. I want to thank you, and I want to move on to Muska Youssef. Muska?
Hi, everybody. My name is Muska Yosef. I want to thank the League of Women Voters for putting this event together. Before I introduce the wonderful organization that I'm a part of, Amplify POC Cape Cod, I want to start with a declaration that we cannot have any discussion about racism on the Cape without first acknowledging our original sin on Cape Cod, which is the fact that we're on stolen land. And that I think every single meeting on the Cape, whether it's an Assembly of Delegates meeting, select board meeting, school committee meeting, or a panel with the League of Women Voters, ought to begin with a statement to acknowledge that we are on stolen land, and a moment of silence to acknowledge the enormity of what was done to this honorable tribe. So I'd like to start with just a very short moment of silence for that acknowledgement. Thank you. So I'd like to start this discussion about what the organization Amplify POC Cape Cod does. I want to start with just explaining what POC stands for, because some people weren't quite sure. It stands for People of Color. And sometimes you'll hear me say POC, sometimes you'll hear me say POC, and those terms are interchangeable. So Amplify POC is a remarkable organization, and it's addressing a form of racism that I don't think is often discussed, which is economic racism. Amplify POC is trying to reduce the racial wealth gap that exists on the Cape, and it's doing that right now in 3 ways. The first way is that there is a website. If you go to www.amplifypoccapecod.com, that will bring you up to our website. And our website is fabulous. We're still adding more things to it. But essentially what it does is you go on there and you can find a ton of different businesses that are owned by people of color. So we provide this visibility and this marketing, and it is incredible. You know, recently I just found this great salon through it. So it's an amazing process, and you can go in, find a ton of great businesses, and you'll be able to meet new people in your community as well that you may not have had any interaction with before. So the first thing I would definitely recommend, definitely go to that website, and I will put it in the chat box. The second objective, or agenda rather, that POC is trying to do, the Amplify POC group, is to provide educational classes and workshops for people of color. And essentially what this is they're going to be workshops on financial literacy, home ownership, entrepreneurship, anything about how to build wealth. And so we actually have our very first program coming up, and I can once again later in this a chat, the Q&A section, I can give more information about it. But financial literacy is a really big part of what we need to do in order to eliminate the racial wealth gap. And the last thing we're working on is really as exciting, is we want to set up scholarships and grants for people of color if they want to do things like apply for college, or if they want to start their own business, the startup costs. So we're also working in that realm to help provide some kind of financial benefit to these young entrepreneurs. So if I had to summarize what we're all about, I think often about that quote that I'm sure a lot of you have heard: you can't be what you don't see. And on the Cape, I think there are so many intelligent and motivated people of color who would thrive as business owners and entrepreneurs, but without the resources and without the mentors, they don't realize that they can do it, and that they don't have those role models that I think people who grew up in white Cape Cod may have had, that people of color do not. So we're here to show these people what they can be. And I hope that you'll all visit our website and help us with these different initiatives. Thank you.
Thank you, Muska. That was very interesting. And I see you have put the information on about the website in the chat, so everybody should go to that. I am now going to call on Eileen Elias. Eileen, tell us how Barnstable No Place for Hate is addressing racism.
Thank you, Susan. I thought maybe my face disappeared earlier. And I appreciate the League of Women Voters for this opportunity. I also personally want to thank the prior speakers, because they've all given everybody a message that is often not easy to hear, which is especially for a person who is white. And that is understanding the importance of hearing and helping not having to get your hands in the grit, but helping people who are Black, Latinx, etc., know that you're there and be asked for support. And I thank you all. No Place for Hate succinctly is about addressing what a title talks about. When George Floyd died or was killed, we made a decision that our emphasis would be in regards to youth. And with that also came with an understanding of open and direct conversations among the members who represent every aspect of organizations in the town of Barnstable, from in regards to disability, faith-based organizations, our Barnstable Police, Barnstable County Human Services Commission, Independence House, Cape Cod Council of Churches, and other advocacy organizations. One of the first objectives was that we put out a call to action that addressed the impact in this regard to people who are Asian, when in fact COVID first appeared, because of the racial remarks that were made to youth and adults who are Asian as the cause of this disorder, and had a myriad, at least of faith-based and other organizations sign on in attention to this and helping parishioners and others address. Our youth listening session was developed in partnership with the youth organizations in the town of Barnstable to help us develop this session and to identify the youth who would speak. The resulting youth listening session had 8 youth, and pleased to know that there will be more information on this played with the Cape Cod Media Center, Channel 99, in the near foreseeable future, and playing a video of the session. But prior to that listening session, we recognized the importance of having a survey on racism from our youth. And however directly youth will speak, knowing that it's not just the 8 youth. And the same questions that were asked of the youth on the listening session, we asked in the survey. What are your direct experiences? What are your bystander experiences? And what do you need from adults? The data has been unbelievably powerful. You can't refute it. And it supports the youth speakers, because much of what they had to say was said in the outcome of the survey that actually included input from youth from across the Cape, all the high schools. We are now in the process of meeting with those high schools, first with Barnstable and the superintendent, and with others, Falmouth, Sandwich, Nauset, DY, etc. Because that data doesn't differ from where the person lives on the Cape. When I came to the Cape, I was told there's a big difference between Mid-Cape, Lower Cape, and Upper Cape, and the culture is different. Well, in this regard, with racism and the response from youth, there's no difference. And that is a sadness, but yet an issue that is in the process of being addressed. We are currently providing a review of how we provide bystander training, which is an integral part of what we'll be using for our training on racism for both schools, faith-based, and advocacy organizations that we're looking forward to put together and put forward. But we also know that that training can't be done just by us. And it, along with an action plan that will address the issues that our youth are addressing, that we are developing now, we must do it, are doing it in partnership and collaboration that you'll be hearing more about this evening from Jean. I can only say to you that what is most exciting about all of this is the partnership aspect. And lastly, we held most recently a microaggression workshop. We're doing one other workshop, just testing it out a bit further and then handing the baton to a wonderful, wonderful trainer, Stiana Mawusi. And those of you who heard her, I hope agree with me. And she will then be moving that workshop, co-sponsored by Falmouth and the Barnstable No Place for Hate program, to her own intensive retreat on microaggressions. With that, and very, very succinctly, I would say to you that as I started, it's all about collaboration and partnership that's making Barnstable No Place for Hate move forward. I thank you.
Thank you, Eileen. Thank you so much for that. Next, we're going to hear from John Reed, who actually is joining by phone. I believe that Jean has that connection. Jean? Jean, you're muted.
Yeah,
Oh,
I'm
there you are.
unmuted now. John, go ahead.
Well, good evening, everybody. I'm having some technical difficulties, but that's okay. I still have something to say. First and foremost, let me thank the League of Women Voters for all the work they put in and all the participants who are participating this evening. Well, the NAACP has been one of the stalwart folks for the last 40 years, actually, but I'm going to talk about the last 2 years and let you know what we're doing. As I said to the community the other day, since we're part of a national organization, most of what we do is in compliance with the national organization's constitution. But I'm involved in recruiting teachers of color for school districts on the Cape, primarily Barnstable and Falmouth. Others are coming on board. I'm encouraged by people wanting to establish diversity committees. But the question is, do you know where the candidates are? And candidates coming to the Cape have some interesting challenges. Besides racism, which does exist, we will acknowledge that. What happens to a 22-year-old who is just out of college that you're trying to bring here as a teacher or an educator or administrator who doesn't know the culture of Cape Cod? It is a big time challenge that happened to me personally. It happened to others that I'm familiar with. And one of the things that becomes a question, where do you get your hair done? Who do you know? What church do you go to? What club did you belong to? These are things that we have to address. Mm-hmm. It's not just how people of color address folks. It's also what do we do within our own community. Mm-hmm. Second thing that we do, invite people to come out and meet with you. I am aware of everything going on. And one of the things that I found interesting is there are a number of members of the NAACP who are part of the committee. I've been keeping track of what's going on through those contacts. So I want to encourage people to not only participate in NAACP, and we meet the second Wednesday of the month at the Zion Union Heritage Museum, but also I go to court, like Muska, I go to court representing parents as their advocates, mainly for kids who get suspended, mainly for kids who are not treated well, and in some cases, a criminal situation. I am not an attorney, I am an advocate, so I will clearly say that right now. But one of the things that I have been talking about for the last 6 months is it's time for us to advocate for ourselves and not worry about the other people because their interest may not be our interest. And that means run for school committee, run for offices, and do something positive. And that's what I've been doing. Our latest project has been the police reform bill. I've been working with Representative Tippy Dates to get things done. So that's where I'm at. And I've also met with some of the chiefs of police, not the Sandwich one, but Yarmouth, Barnstable, and Down Cape. So that's what we've been doing. And I thank you for the time.
You're on mute.
I'm on
Susan,
mute.
Susan is, thank you so much.
Sorry. John, thank you for your comments. I'm going to pass it
I'm hanging up,
along
John.
now
right.
to Jean for final
Okay.
thoughts.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you for your comments. In particular, John, I really appreciate you making a statement that no one else can make. And that is, it is about us and empowering our own community. And thank you for making it real and helping others to build empathy versus sympathy when they understand the day-to-day lives and interworkings of racism among Black and Brown people. And it is about us. Part of this work is about us empowering ourselves, as Amplify was explained by Muska, and also showing up to be part of legislation, be part of town government. And also, John, thank you for mentioning the League of Women Voters 40 plus year history, 100 years old, but 40 plus year history around civil rights and the civil rights movement, and supporting, namely, in the last 2 years, the legislation for mail-in ballots that would not have happened in Massachusetts, I feel comfortable to say, without the League of Women Voters, which is a large network and make up a lot of us, as well as all of the voter education that the League does. So the League addresses diversity, equity, inclusion on really 3 levels: the national level, the state level, and the local level, and all are committed to DEI. And I mention that because it's very important to do this work when you're out of an organization. It has to come from the top down and the bottom up. So you need to have people that are in decision-making positions have intent on doing diversity work and inclusion and working towards equity. And to that end, this League works on particular 2 areas, or actually the whole League, I'm sorry: education of ourselves and the community, and advocacy for systemic change. As I mentioned, legislation, work on legislation and moving bills forward that work towards equity is one of those advocacy routes. We've developed a policy statement on all levels, and you can check out the one that the League of Women Voters Cape Cod has on our website. So we have policy statements on diversity, equity, and inclusion, and we're more importantly making it central to the organizational work that we do and part of all the work, not separate silos or separate work to do. We don't do diversity work. We are trying to become more diverse and more inclusive, and to specifically address and combat racism. The League of Women Voters US and Massachusetts have created a resource bank of educational materials, reading materials, suggestions. It's a very good comprehensive resource that, and videos and training models that our members have access to. And Sue or Karen can school me if the public has access. I'm not sure. I think you have to be a member. The Massachusetts League has established a DEI peer group to serve as support and collaboration for all local leagues in the Commonwealth to share information about how they are advancing DEI work in their local leagues. We are producing educational programs to educate ourselves and the community on issues of racism. Obviously, this is our second one. But before this, we also had a presentation on women of color that were important from Massachusetts, that were important during the suffrage movement. So we educated ourselves about the past discrimination and racism, and spoke about how we want to do things differently and why racism is important, but connected directly to the League through the League's 100-year celebration and history of women of color being part of the League, or being part of the suffrage movement, now need to be part of the League. And they are becoming part of the League. In addition to that, we did do a survey of our membership to see how they viewed, what they thought was next steps or information or education that they thought that they need. So we have people thinking about, it's internalizing, having people think about the notion of racism and what their connection is, what they need to understand, what they need to do. So it's really important to get information from people about that. This Cape Cod League has been intentional on recruiting women of color, or I should say people of color, because men can join too. And being intentional means that there's a strategy to that, what John talked about, going to places where people of color are and being in their world. That's how I found the league, or the league found me. And also using people from the Black and Brown community as you make those connections to bring other people. And that was my story too, that an older woman who's a woman of color, I went to an immigration presentation that the League of Women Voters sponsored at, or did in collaboration with the NAACP at the Heritage Museum. So that's a place I was gonna go. That's a topic that I was gonna go here. The league was there and they said, who are you? And I said, who are you? And then we started, and then I went to some of their events. My dear friend Maddie, a woman of color who's been in the league for a long time, took me to a couple of events, and the environment was welcoming. People said hello to me. People recognized I was there. It's important to take those moves and to be, and I think I like working with the leadership of this league because I think they model what the national has called for and what the state has called for and the policies of trying to create a welcoming and inclusive environment. And the last thing I will say is that the League of Women Voters continues to recruit members representing diverse populations by doing the work that we normally do. This summer, we partnered with different groups. We had voter registration, voter education days at the new Cape Verdean, I'm remembering the name of it, it's a long name, Cape Verdean Museum and Cultural Center in Falmouth. So again, it's being in the places and environments that are natural to the people that you're trying to recruit. It makes sense to do that. So that's one example of how we are doing recruitment, and there are others. We also collaborate, as we have with this event, with other organizations, whether it be on education forums or whether it be on supporting legislation that addresses racism. At the state and local level, we supported the efforts to reform policing and culminating in the passage of the Police Act, SB 2963, an act relative to justice, equity, and accountability in law enforcement in the Commonwealth. So the league has a big arm, and that's very important when you're doing work on racism, is connecting to organizations like the league and like the NAACP that have a local, state, and national reach, because systemic change really needs to be done at all levels and all branches of government. And the last, I think, one more, that's it. I'm getting my cue.
Thank you, Jean. I think after we've heard from all of these panelists, we should all be encouraged by the substantial amount of work and programs that each organization's involved in. But what you may have noticed is that many of these organizations have parallel agendas, which at times intersect and at times overlap. The question is, how can we take advantage of these synergies to move forward to combat racism here on the Cape? This is a question that the League of Women Voters has asked, and they have a proposed answer, which Jean Morrison will now share. Jean?
Okay, this is a segue from what I was going to say in my last thought, is that we're doing this work. It isn't simply to address every incident of racial aggressions. We try, but that doesn't always happen, and it's not enough. The goal of this work is not only to heighten awareness and raise consciousness or highlight the atrocities of racism and come up with actions, or sometimes, most times, reactions to address the issues. The ultimate goal is to eradicate racism. All of the organizations that you've heard from, and maybe some of yours, are working diligently to address racism on Cape Cod and taking action, but we're working in silos to address a well-established systemic problem. There is duplicity in the work. We're doing the same work with the same people, addressing the same issues, approaching the same organizations, individuals, groups, policies, legislation that we want to see change. It becomes fatiguing and people burn out. We've got to build more unity and cohesion because racism does not burn out. The work of the organizations you've heard from tonight and that of others needs to be amplified and sustained. The day-to-day living work is the hard work, and it's the hard work, but it still is not enough. To address systemic racism, we need a systems approach to achieve systemic justice. As my colleague Wesley Williams said to me the other day, we need to build a tapestry of the work. Racial justice means that fairness, inclusion, equity, and equality are part of the fabric of day-to-day life, the education, healthcare, economic, employment, housing, policing, and government systems. Collectively, we have an opportunity now to influence the impact and sustainability of our work. There's strength in unity, so we do work together on various initiatives. The benefits of collaborations help us pool our resources, have a broader reach, and strengthen our missions. Yet there is a stronger collective approach that could have a greater impact on the lives of people of color and help to promote that greater lasting change. To that end, this group of panelists with the League of Women Voters Cape Cod area is exploring the possibility of forming a coalition of multiple organizations with shared goals to develop a collaborative Cape-wide action plan to help us progress towards eliminating racism in our area. There may be other organizations on this call tonight or individuals interested in joining this work. Please contact us if you are via the chat or the League's email, lwvcca@gmail.com. Thanks.
Very good. Thank you. Thank you, Jean. I think now we'd like to take some questions that were submitted by the audience from the chat. And I believe Karen Maza has a question for the panelists. Karen.
Yes, our first question has to do with the data that was collected by Barnstable, No Place for Hate. So Eileen, if you could answer this question, is data from the survey available? Eileen, you're on mute.
Thank you for that question. It's very important. The data in this report is very sensitive. It was targeted primarily for Barnstable, and at least 55% of the respondents have their issues in regards to Barnstable. The remaining data, the other. We are meeting and just beginning next week to meet with the superintendent of Barnstable, of the Barnstable system, and to be able to talk through that data and what it means. After we have been able to discuss this data and formally review it, we then will want to proceed to meet, as I said earlier, with other high schools, charter schools, private schools, so that they too can be informed. And that's our intent. So the data, the report itself is not publicly available at this time, so that we can, in fact, use it effectively to honor our youth in the type of issues that they have brought forward.
So Eileen, you mentioned, however, that there was going to be a production that might be available. So maybe that's another way for people to find out about the program. Could you just mention again how that might happen?
The Cape Cod Media Center on its, I think it's channel 99, will be showing our youth listening session, a shortened version. It's about 30 minutes of an hour-and-a-half program. And it should be made available the latter part of next week. I don't have the specific schedule because we're adding some information to that video that needed to be added for clarity of the user or the listener.
Okay, thanks very much. Our next question comes from Judy, and she has a compliment for the panel. Thank you for the great work you're doing. The question is, there's a lot of research on the impact of institutional racism on health. Do any of you know of any programs that Cape Cod Healthcare offers to help POC access equitable care, given the presence of implicit bias? Are there even any physicians of color on the staff of CCH? Anybody have any knowledge of that?
I can say to you, if it would be of help, there is a behavioral health work group that is facilitated by Beth Albert out of the county human services. And it includes representatives from across the Cape. There is no person of color on that group.
I can comment on it briefly. Someone from Cape Cod Healthcare contacted me within the last week asking a similar question. So they asked me if I would meet with some of the higher ups, the leadership there, to talk about what are some things they could do. So it's on their radar that they need to address those things. And I see I don't even know what the network of doctors and nurses and other clinicians of color are, other than what I see visually. So it's an important question.
I have one comment as well.
Oh, go ahead.
Sorry. So I can't speak directly to the institution that she was referencing, but there is a wonderful organization and a woman of color who heads it named Ayanna Parent. So she has Be Free Coaching. She's a social worker and she deals with trauma. And a lot of what she deals with is a variety of things, but one of which is how to get certain trauma, how to cope with it through traditional therapy, movement, yoga, meditation, mindfulness. And so she is an amazing resource for how to help people of color cope with the trauma and the microaggressions that they deal with on a daily basis. And I believe she's also working on putting together a Excel spreadsheet with more information of people of color who are social workers, therapists, and whatnot. So that's something that I think once I have access to it, I'd be happy to share it with anybody who's interested.
I just wanted to add to that we are a member of a group that has been convened by the health department. And what they're doing is looking into vaccine equity, because they recognize that people of color are really not getting access to this. So what's happening is we have been working with them to get the information out about availability of vaccines. And most recently, they published the information in both Portuguese and Spanish The real problem, of course, is no matter how good you are in getting the word out, if you don't have the vaccine, what good is it? So obviously they are putting all of their effort into trying to increase the number of vaccines available. And then there is some thought that maybe there would be some way to have clinics where there are these health deserts, basically, to assist minority communities in getting their vaccine. So there is something in the works, but I don't know what we did to Governor Baker that he doesn't want to send us more vaccines. I'm perplexed.
I think, Susan, one of the important things with those initiatives to get it to communities of color, I mean, down on the Cape, there are maybe neighborhoods and groups and interactions and communities through churches and so forth, like John explained. But it's not like in the city where there are big parts of the city, neighborhoods. It's not quite like that. And one of the biggest challenges I find, and the need, frankly, because I've talked to a few people specifically about this, is dispelling some of the myths and beliefs about I could talk about one person in particular who spoke to me about the Nigerian community and called me to ask me questions about, are people of color going to get, or Black people going to get sicker from the injection, from the vaccines? And the other myths, like the studies weren't done to include people of color, and Ayanna Pressley was just on, you probably find on YouTube, where she talks about what are some things to dispel the myths. She talks about toolkits that you can go and you can find resources, and I will get a little more information and get it so Richard can send it out. But resources of how to talk about, dispel the myths in your communities and help people get ready, because I've also had people that tell me they're not getting the vaccine because they don't need it, and you're going to get COVID. You can get COVID anyway. I mean, there's just a lot of, I don't know where people find some of these distorted views, and there's some fear among people. So, I mean, that has to be recognized. And the last thing I want to say is we really do need to address the medical issues for people of color, the disparities in healthcare. And what are those, back to the question that was in the chat about any training or information that Cape Cod Healthcare is the network of the hospitals and some of the, primarily the majority of healthcare providers on Cape Cod. So that's an important group to get together with on this issue.
I'd like to chime in I'd like to chime in just quickly. Thank you, Jean and Susan, for talking about the vaccine. Recently, before the vaccine was offered, I brought it up at one of our town council meetings. The concern that I was receiving from people from my community were concerned about not having enough money to get tested. This is before the vaccine. So that is an issue. And, people kind of looked at me kind of cross-eyed, but it is an issue. If we're not testing, able to test everyone or provide everyone the opportunity to get the vaccine because of financial reasons, then we're all vulnerable. So that was just one thing I just wanted to mention. The other issue had to do with the hospital and the number of doctors, nurses, etc., that we may or may not have. I know in the past and I can't speak what's happening currently, but I know there were doctors of color. I had a woman that went to my church who had a male of color who was a cardiologist. So I know they are there or were there. It would be interesting to know what the status is right now, because many of us do feel a little more comfortable when we can, reach out to someone that perhaps, understands our skin, understands our healthcare needs. I think it would be important to find out as much information as we can. So I'm glad to hear that the Cape Cod Healthcare is looking into this matter, particularly at this time. Thank you.
You ready for another question, Susan?
I think we have time for maybe just one or two more. Yes.
There were a couple of people who were talking about getting candidates to run for office. And I know that John Reed mentioned that with regard to school committee. And other people have raised some questions about that. So I wanted to make people aware of two programs. The League is going to do a program this next week, March 3rd. That's a Wednesday, and it'll be from 7 to 8:30. And it's Keys to Success for Effective School Committees. And our audience is intended to be for people who are considering running for school committee, or for people in the community who simply want to know what they can do to help their school committees be more effective. So that's another thing that would be available through our league. Also, we are intending, not this spring, but next spring, to run an informational forum on the importance of the district attorney's office. And that would be something that would be helpful for anybody who's considering running for DA, and also to all of us as voters. So just wanted to make people aware of that. And I see I have 11 new messages, so I'm quickly scanning here. There is a column, observation about racism in the schools. We need to address curriculum, teaching methods, classroom practices, etc. Current social justice informed pedagogy. That's not really a question, but a good observation. There are a number of people who are interested in the workshop that the MLK group is doing, and I believe that information is in the chat. That's going to be available in the spring. And Jean, is there something that you wanted to say about the health panel? You've got to unmute, Jean.
I was just going to mention that people can hear Ayana Parent. She'll be talking about mental health issues on a panel that the league has coming up. She'll be one of the panelists talking about the mental health issues relative to people of color and some of the work that she does.
Okay, thank you. There's a question here, does the approach to racism differ, and thus are the issues differ from area to area in this country because the Black population in various areas are different? The Black population, like any group, is not homogeneous. It's made up of groups from various backgrounds. Is this being addressed? Anybody want to take that?
Yes.
Go ahead, Deb. I was just going to get John on to see if he wants to answer after you.
Just wanted to respond as a Black woman, as a Black child, that I experienced this similarities in how I was treated in various parts of the country. Although I grew up among whites in my neighborhood, and there was 2 Black families on our street, there still was that segregation there. But my parents taught us a healthy, and the whites who lived in my community had a healthy relationship for those of us of color. We were not teased or taunted, but you knew your limitations, where you could go, so on and so forth. as I left as a child and went out into the world to college and, various other places, I still experience the similar kinds of treatment. Um, and when I came to Cape Cod, it was no difference. I remember my mother saying, you came to Cape Cod, you had a smile on your face. And over the years, that you could see the look on your face, the smiles kind of turned down now. And, just, trying to keep my spirits up, that, hang in there, be proud of who you are, and be proud to, that you're proud, African American. You have something to share, something to give, and you can learn from others. And I've always kind of considered that. So just quickly to the person who asked that question. Yes, I've lived among Hispanics, the majority of Hispanics. I've lived among Asians, but it's something about being a Black American or being Black per se that tends to follow you in terms of how people initially can treat you, but not all people, thank goodness.
Okay, John would like to answer this question as well. The question was, does the approach to racism differ? And thus are the issues different from area to area in this country because the Black population in various areas are different? They're not one homogeneous group.
Well, yes, the answer to that is yes. And different areas of the country have different value systems and different cultural norms. And coming to Cape Cod was a culture shock for me because I came from Boston, via Amherst, and all of a sudden you end up down here amongst a whole lot of white people who never seen a Black professional before. Their attitude is, well, you're supposed to clean my house. You're not supposed to be teaching school. And more importantly, how do I know you're qualified? Well, my answer was, I came from an institution that wouldn't let you out of there unless you were qualified. And coming down here, the challenge has been there's still towns down here who don't have a whole lot of people of color. A classic example is Sandwich. When you get there, how do you get treated? You go to the store, like I said earlier, people of color have different needs that white people can't fulfill. And I'm not going to bite my tongue and say it doesn't exist. It does exist. Matter of fact, there was a little friction down here amongst Cape Verdeans and Blacks. They tell you they're not Black, they're white. I'm saying, well, you compared to white people, you're Black. I don't know what you're talking about. And when we have Jamaicans here now, we have Hispanics here now, we have Haitians here now, we have a ton of people, and Brazilians. So when you say community together, we have to figure out a way to bring people to the table and air the differences, not how they're different, but what they have in common.
Thank you. There's an observation here from someone who'd like to point out that there just aren't enough opportunities here in terms of even entertainment. Everything's designed around the white population and tourists. So Cape Cod becomes like Black History Month, just the same old events summer after summer.
Okay, Karen, I think we have run out of time. Am I still muted? No, I'm not.
No, you're not.
Okay. So what I'd like to do is really wrap this up. I want to thank all the panelists. I think you did a great job in letting this large group of people, over 100 people who have signed on to this webinar, know what's going on, and hopefully they've taken note of the panelists, and if there are activities that they'd like to participate in, we urge you to join one of those groups. Additionally, I want to remind everybody, if they're interested in pursuing a common, larger collaborative agenda. You can send your name, and if there is an organizational affiliation, to the League of Women Voters of the Cape Cod area, and that's lwvcca@gmail.com. And with that, I want to thank the League for its leadership in bringing this second webinar to all of us who enjoyed and were the first one and just felt that we needed another one to round out the loop. So thank you all for attending this evening. Okay, I think with that, have a good evening, everyone.